Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Ms. Rhonda Shaffer. And I'd like to thank you, Rhonda, for taking the time to spend some time with us talking about team building and specifically about how to resolve conflicts within a team and promoting collaboration. So let me start by asking you to briefly share with us your background.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Professor Safai. I have more than 25 years experience within business. I first started out in the private sector. I've owned my own company. I've also worked as a consultant. My academic degree is in accounting, and so I am a seasoned accountant. I've done auditing and all levels of financial management, taxation. I've also owned an Allstate insurance franchise, and I have worked in a number of private industries. I received my master's degree in business intelligence, which enabled me to learn the skills to develop and manage decision support systems and analytics. And I chose to get that degree for predominantly within the accounting profession. We use things called computer-aided auditing tools and techniques, and a lot of desktop tools, a lot of intelligence tools before they ever became popular like they are now, to help us with leading projects and presenting our information and results so that business leaders could make decisions. I've also served as a chief financial officer, a chief audit executive, and I found that throughout my career, it was very important I've led projects, and quite often as you move up within your career, you will take on more responsibilities and leading and managing very important projects that will change the outcomes of the organization, leading it in a positive direction. I found that I wanted to obtain my PMP, my project management professional certification. So I have that as well. I have a number of different accounting certifications. About 13, 14 years ago, I joined the federal government. I was very successful within the private sector, working on a global scale, and I evaluated my where I was within my career, and I realized that the one thing I hadn't yet done was serve in federal government. And so I took that on. My first position was to work with the United States Coast Guard. And I was brought in to lead the Coast Guard in obtaining its financial audit opinion, supporting DHS with their first financial audit. The U.S. Coast Guard is one of the components within the Department of Homeland Security. So leveraging all the skills and tools that I had learned in the private sector, I was able to come and bring that to DHS. And I learned a lot about how the federal government operates within DHS and leading project teams and trying to achieve results in a very bureaucratic driven organization such as we have with all of our federal agencies. After having leading some great successes within DHS, I took a position with the Department of Veterans Affairs, more on a policy level, VA being largest civilian agency within the federal government, very veteran-centric. You're probably familiar with their medical mission. The president of, or I'm sorry, President Lincoln, Abe Lincoln, he actually founded the Department of Veterans Affairs after the Civil War to take care of all of the injured veterans, their families, their widows, and their dependents, to make sure that they always had benefits in medical care. So that helped build the military force and the veteran organizations that we have today. Also within the VA, they are leading in medical research, and a lot of developments come through the VA. It's a very, very large organization, agency, and it has a large world footprint, doctors all over. After that, I spent almost 5 years with the VA. I took a position with the U.S. House of Representatives. I was hired to bring in a new directorate that would help address some audit issues. The House of Representatives helped me understand the political aspects of the federal government and how to logistically maneuver throughout that and still be able to get the job done. Working with a lot of individuals in a lot of different areas. After the House of Representatives, I took a position as the regional CFO with the United States Marine Corps. I lived and worked in Okinawa, Japan. I had CFOs that worked for me. We were forward deployed. The Marine Corps is primarily responsible for contingent type operations. And the area that I was at in the Indo-Asia Pacific area has actually got the largest Marine Corps presence there. After working with the Marine Corps, I was asked to take on a position with the U.S. Army, and I am still with the Department of Army right now. So that's a pretty, you can see I have a large, broad portfolio of experiences.
Wow, that's very impressive. You mentioned a couple times about the fact that you had to use project management teams to accomplish what you have been able to accomplish. Can you share with us some of the examples that come to mind in highlighting how you built the team, how did you manage these teams, and also what were the occasions that perhaps there were some conflicts in these teams that you had to address?
So that's a lot to take in. I mean, it's a lot of in regards to answering that question, a lot of information I could provide you, so I'll try to be concise. It should be understood that there are very few careers where an individual does not serve on the team, whether they're a part of the team or they're leading the team. And we should, as we move forward with that, one of the things that I found was important is that if I'm going to participate on the team or I'm going to lead the team, we all have a common goal to achieve whatever the objectives are that chartered the team from the beginning. So I chose to get my PMP because I found that some of the colleagues that I worked with throughout my career, they were utilizing a framework, a structured framework that I found on most of the teams that used that Project Management Institute framework. We were more successful in achieving our objectives within the timeline, or often better results at times. And so as I learned that framework, I realized that that application really applies into so many areas within my career that I had already been using. Like I referenced the computer-aided, the CATS tool. But even as a regional CFO, and I'm responsible for millions of dollars in appropriated funds from Congress, as well as funds that we're collecting on the local community in multiple currencies and things, I found that I also, I could connect that PMP framework into my day-to-day management as a CFO and closing out the financials, setting up a structure, setting up a project plan on how we would close the financials each and every month to make sure that we had everything accurately and timely reported. So it's within, I encourage all individuals, take a look. It's, to me, within their benefit to understand the Project Management Institute framework. It's a worldwide recognized framework. So I really appreciate that. And I'm also an intellect. I like understanding statistics and things. And as I started to learn about how, very few projects are successful and what makes them successful, and some of the components within the framework, planning, for instance, that was another area that I could relate back into my career and my profession. Planning is should predominantly in the auditing profession, it should be 80% of your entire engagement. So the team should come together and spend 80% of their time planning and 20% of their time executing. Well, that's something very important when you look at the stats that are provided by the PMI, and they talk about how the planning of projects, how projects have over the years, especially technology projects, have expanded over many years. That the technology projects that have been most successful are the ones that spend more years planning to build that technology tool, whatever it may be. They are more successful in planning and spending more time at the beginning of their project planning, and then they get the proper requirements so that they can develop the systems for implementation, and they're deployed much better. So, in a structured way, I was very much drawn to the PMP. The other aspect, to the other part of your question in regards to the conflict piece of the question, that is, as I said, most individuals are going to work on a team, whether they're working with people or they're leading the team. And I found that early in my career, I would get discouraged and not know how to manage some of these teams I was working on. I might have one way in my mind of the direction that how we needed to proceed within the team, but I may have a teammate that had another idea and another teammate that had another idea. So through the years, I was able to better develop that. I've had some great coaches and mentors, some great team leaders that I've been able to emulate, some of the things that I've learned on those teams. The most important aspects of that in dealing with the team is I found that, the most important thing to remember is that most of the times you're working on a change. It can be an improvement, it can be a new system, whatever it is. So how are you going to impact the organization? You got to be careful of the type of change that you're going to bring. There are positive and negative changes that can come to the organization. So getting your leadership buy-in from the beginning, and then understanding the differences and the views of others on the team. One of the greatest, when you're understanding the team environment, one of the greatest things, skills I think that I've learned from other leaders is that whenever you look at the when the team is resisting, where some of that resistance is coming from, give the team the opportunity to pause and then be able to talk out some of their ideas. And a lot of times you'll find that some of that resistance or maybe some risks or challenges that you had not already considered. And I'm kind of answering your questions in a long way, but if you'd like, I can give you an example of.
That would be great.
Yeah, okay, so I had one of the projects that I was running for the Coast Guard was to help them achieve their audit opinion on, we first started with the balance sheet. There's multiple financial statements that are used, but the audit opinion, very important. It's actually within law for DHS. DHS was stood up right after 9/11, and they had when the agency was formed, it was written into law that they would obtain a clean audit financial opinion. Unfortunately, when I came aboard in 2007 to the Coast Guard, they still had not been able to obtain that opinion. And the reason why is because of the large military pension and medical liability that the Coast Guard handles, and then also just being able to account for their property. So already having a number of years of experience in the private sector, I was brought into the Coast Guard to help lead their medical and pension liability effort to help the agency gain its opinion. And within the Coast Guard, just using some of the skills that I had learned throughout my career in the private sector, and then also some of those foundational things, because I had teams, first time ever leading teams within the federal government. I had learned some techniques to help facilitate and things like that. So I was moving along, progressing really well with the effort that I gained the leadership and confidence, or I gained the confidence of my leadership to take on some larger projects. So the actuary had kind of highlighted that, although we're making great progress with this effort in obtaining the opinion, that we would need an experience study that the actuary would use to actually build what that liability would be in the future. So, simple things like understanding, being able to support how many military members you have, what type of gender they were, their longevity, how long their career was, just a number of different demographic data that's used to help build into that actuarial liability. So because we had had such great success, the headquarters, they were briefing out to Congress that we would be able to make it within 5 years. And as they saw that we were moving along our timeline much faster, they said, why not throw an experience study in the same fiscal year, and see if we could obtain that. So I'm always willing to take on a challenge. I said, yep, I think I can do it. And so I laid out for the leadership how I thought we could achieve that. And I explained that I needed a team because the demographic data was so varied. I needed a team that had experience across the military and the civilian population of the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard is a small service, so they, working with the leadership, we decided to bring military members in on orders, find a central location, That location was in Kansas, so it wasn't a glamorous location. Not a lot to do on your free time, but we would bring in the military members on orders and utilize a diverse civilian population as well, and try to accomplish this task over 8 weeks. So as the team started coming in, I had to think of, okay, what are we going to do to come together as a team? Where are we going to work? Where are we going to put our computers? We're going to be in a room with each other all day, every day. And as the team, we had representation of the team, all different nationalities, races, representing different operational groups of the Coast Guard. We had retirees and, longtime civil servants that represented the team. Well, at one scenario, as we were making good progress, the team meshed well at first. We got to heavy into the project. We were just a few weeks from concluding, and one of my junior military members made a derogatory statement that really wasn't very politically correct or racially sensitive to an African-American senior female member. And it was, as soon as that individual said it, it was like all of the momentum of our team was sucked out of the room. And everyone was just shocked at what this person said. And I knew immediately with some of my other project management training, put things on pause, try to understand, did this person realize what they were saying? It seemed completely out of the ordinary. And immediately half of the room started getting very upset, very agitated. They were very sensitive to the comment that was made and had a lot of empathy for that African-American female member. That military member was also senior. So they held in their hands the ability to, they call it an Article 15, to do something very serious that would impact that junior member's career. And so as I pulled the junior member aside, and I'm a civilian, and this is a military member, trying to communicate with them and help understand, why did you say this? Where did this come from? Come to find out that individual had no idea of the racial impact of the comment that they were saying. And after going back and talking with the senior member and helping them understand that there was probably something more to that, I think we were able to effectively diffuse the situation. And then as we continued as a team, it was a little tense at first, but we kept working together as a team. I encouraged them to respect their differences of each other. That picked up. They started appreciating each other. And when we had concluded, that senior member actually had pulled that junior member aside and said, I'm going to talk to you not as your senior officer. I'm going to talk to you as a person, and a person who's older than you, and what I've been through as an individual. And that really impacted that person, just that effect of the communication. And when we were finished, we were able to get the results of the team. So that was a great success for us. But it really boiled down to, at the end of the day, respecting the teammates that you're working with. And so I think in conflict, we really need to make sure that we take the time to communicate. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that I do is I pause and I try to understand what is happening, what's being messaged, what are some of the concerns of the team, what are some of the things that they're bringing up that they really want us, maybe they want to have a voice to say something, and for some reason they don't feel empowered to do that, or they're nervous of what their comments might reflect on others, or sometimes they just rush, like that junior member, they just rush, something came to mind, they spit it out of their mouth without even thinking about how that would impact others. So really understanding how relationships are built and communication on the team, I think, is a responsibility of everybody who serves on that team.
Well, that's a great example, and it's interesting as you point out you sense that conflict immediately would take the inertia out of the team, and without that intervention, probably the team would have disintegrated and the cohesion would have been lost. So that intervention, that was a great experience that you shared with us, especially at these times that we're, the whole nation is going through becoming more aware of these issues. So when you look at all these teams that you have led or had been a member of, and the conflicts that you had endured and you had helped resolve, what are some of the key learnings that you would like to depart with us?
So I think the main thing, two things of importance. Number one, get the buy-in. Make sure that you got a clear understanding of what your leadership is looking for, whoever you're working for. And make sure that take the time to know what you've been chartered to do, what the goals and the objectives are. Look at it from every angle. And also, know what your role and responsibility is on the team. What kind of teammate are you? Have some self-awareness of what you bring to the team. And it's that self-awareness, having, we call it in the military situational awareness. It's very, very important that you know that and you understand that, so you can reflect upon what the impact of your decisions are. And, I just by nature of who I am, I like structure and organization, but I've worked on teams where they don't have that. And, I've got someone that I can't nail down deadlines with them and things like that. So understanding and respecting, sometimes those individuals are the most creative and innovative people that I don't want to suppress that. I want to be someone who brings that out. But at the same time, my organizational skills can help keep us, on budget, within time, on scope, all those important project management pieces that you're looking at. So having that self-awareness and know that, as we're all working on teams, something's going to change. It's so what reaction are you going to get from that change? Should you be leading the change? Should you, are you someone who pushes back against change? And that may be just within the upbringing and the nature of some individuals. Sometimes they just stand back and they're not ready to move on, even though they're on the team that's leading the change. So understand that. Know if you're resisting. Another technique that I've learned in the military is called the red team concept. And I know that's also a concept within project management. And I find understanding who I am, bringing some self-awareness to the team, and what my role is. Sometimes I'm on the red team. Sometimes I've got somebody red teaming me. And knowing how I feel about the particular project that we're working on kind of helps me decide, should I be on the red team or should I have somebody red team me?
And briefly, the red team concept, if you could describe that.
So the red team concept is where, as you're developing this, whatever it is, ERP system, or it's a new service you're improving, whatever it may be within the organization, it can have a tangible product or an intangible. Mm-hmm. So as you're developing that and you're moving forward as the team, part of the team steps away and they become the red team. And their job is to tear apart what you've created. So they're going to look for all of the weaknesses. They're going to have the critical eye on everything that you're doing. And what that does is another term for it is called murder boarding. And it's a way of, before people go in and they're interviewed by their senior leadership or a key stakeholder, they can play out various scenarios. And so the red team will help provide a perspective that the counter view for you, so that you can help anticipate what that might be going into your leadership, understanding their concerns that maybe you didn't factor in before. But then also it helps too when they're looking for weaknesses, maybe something you didn't identify, that if you fully deployed whatever it is, that it may not be successful. And so the red team concept is very important within a project. My advice would be, though, don't just throw the red team concept out there and do it without making sure that your whole team understands you would be moving into that role, or you're recommending that role. Clearly identifying roles and responsibilities of who's going to do that, because that could be very confrontational. And if you don't do it right, it can create its own set of conflict instead of helping. So the red team concept is, it also helps too, I think, when we know we build it into our project plan, that we're going to say, okay, we're going to red team these ideas, because then it helps minimize all the other conflict you might have in developing ideas. And sometimes you can't move forward. You don't know how to move forward. The red team, you can say, we're going to red team that. So let's park that and red team that later. So that kind of helps facilitate and keep the team moving forward. And when we're talking about handling conflict, and the other thing that I like to look at is the conflict related to a process or a person. So I try not to make the conflict personal or emotional, because when we get our emotions involved, it's very hard. Now that's easier said than done. I mean, look at what we're in right now. We're in a COVID-19 environment, and it has not only can cause serious health-related issues, it can take people's lives. And so we have a real-world pandemic that we're in right now, and emotions are running very high amongst a lot of populations. And so how does, you think about that up on a national level, how does our medical providers, our advisors, our local, state, federal organizations, how do they protect us? How do we protect others in this type of environment that we're in now? And there are a lot of things that we have to, a lot of different efforts that are coming up that we need to help keep us safe or help us move through this pandemic. This pandemic is not, the fact that we're taking on this large effort to do this, to make it through, for us to make it through okay, is not any different than what a lot of organizations have to take on, whatever the driving factor may be, whether it's financial, whether it's IT, whether it's, you're opening up a new market. There are other factors that are driving it. Within this current environment, it happens to be a health-related factor. So if you want, I can give you a little bit more idea of what I think might be a great breakout exercise for your students. And
that would be great.
So I think it's always good to practice conflict, and this is something that I've done as icebreakers type with project teams, and I call it conflict to consensus. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, I talked a little, my overview and the knowledge I have working in the private and the public sector. federal government. When I was a chief audit executive for a global manufacturing firm, I was called in by my boss and he said, Rhonda, I need your team to go out and determine why we're having renal failure within our animals on our private label pet food that we're feeding them. So basically something had happened, some sort of contaminated product had gotten into the food system of this food that we were manufacturing. And so, I had my first exposure at that time about how you deal with a sort of emergency response pandemic at that level from a private sector view. So to help bring some knowledge and understanding to your students, there's a law actually in place in the United States. It's called the Stafford's Act. And that law sets up how the government will respond to emergency incidences. And sure enough, I saw it firsthand. I was able to experience it and saw how orchestrated the federal government came in, working with the private sector to deal with a situation. I mean, this was the largest recall in consumer history, and people were afraid. I mean, everyone loves their pets, and pet food is also it's considered for human consumption. So you have to be very careful about what's put into it and make sure that it's safe. So as the federal government or the Stafford Act is that what happens is incidences are ran at a local level. They're managed at a local level first. So the local and state authorities are the ones who determine that they have an incident. And there are two types of incidences that they could declare. One would be an emergency, and another one would be a major. An emergency would be something that, in our case, ours was an emergency. We declared an emergency. We notified, as a private sector, we notified our local and state authorities and then pushed it up to the federal level and started coordinating with them. COVID-19 is considered a major emergency. So when it's just an emergency declaration, that emergency declaration is handled at the local and state levels and then pushed up. And a major is when the president can come in and declare. And the president declared that the COVID-19 would be considered a major declaration. In both instances of that declaration, the efforts of how that's handled are first orchestrated through the states and their governors. And so the governors are very instrumental because they represent the people more at a local level, and they have the ability to push down into the infrastructure and the resources they have to make sure that whatever it may be can be delivered immediately to the people locally. Whenever a state governor declares, or whenever there's an emergency declared, the state will determine what level of support that they need from the federal government. And what's great is there are agencies throughout the federal government. For instance, right now there's HHS, CDC, FEMA that are responding, but there's also the Department of Defense. And so while I'm working in the Department of Defense right now, I've had the opportunity to look firsthand on how we're responding to COVID-19. And the federal government is, because of all the resources that the federal government has in regards to the number of manpower. For instance, in the Army, we have over 1 million soldiers. 1 million soldiers that can be instantly pushed out to help respond to a response. The initial response for COVID-19 was for the Corps of Engineers to set up medical temporary hospitals in locations throughout the United States. So that's an example. The National Guard still serves today in doing tests and deploying tests and taking tests. So the manpower and resources that are offered up within the federal within the Department of Defense is one benefit of responding to disasters. The other piece is the equipment, the billions and billions of dollars of assets that can be leveraged to deploy out to various areas, or you can repurpose. So the Army is a land force, and so they have a lot of equipment that they deal with, land-based equipment, and they have a lot of depot maintenance facilities throughout all of the United States to help maintain and sustain that equipment. Those facilities instantly can be repurposed and retooled, so that for the ventilators, for instance, all of a sudden the Army started retooling their equipment to create ventilators. So that's an example. The equipment is very important. The training of the military is ongoing. They train all over the world. They train for all kinds of incidences. They train with all of the different agencies. And then as well, organizationally, how they're set up. So whenever an incident is declared, there becomes an on-site command. It's led by FEMA under the Stafford Act. So they become the on-site coordinator. And then depending on what type of other resources they need within the federal government, they'll pull that in. So giving you a little bit of background of how all that works. For your breakout exercise, I think that I'm provided you a kind of an instruction sheet and tutorial for your team. And, you know, one of the things that, as I said, I'm able, working in Army, being a part of logistics right now in my career, I've been able to see how the Army is operating and supporting the new Operation Warp Speed project that's just been formed between the federal government and private industry in coming up with a vaccine out to 300 million vaccines by January 2021. I'm able to see actually behind the scenes of what's going on with that right now. Dr. Esper, the Department of Defense Secretary, is one chair. Secretary Alvarez is the second chair. There is some private senior advisors from the science and pharmaceutical communities. And then General Gustav Perna, who actually within the area that I work within logistics, I've had the opportunity to personally work with him and brief him. He is considered the Chief Operations Officer for Operation Warp Speed. He's the Chief Logistics Officer for the Army, which is, as I said, is a land force to go out and deploy things and make sure that that at any given time, that the force structure is ready to win and respond in any incident. And so, you know, it's exciting to see my organization help support whatever resources Army has that they can help provide into this effort. So this breakout exercise, as I'm able to see operationally and experience on the back end, this breakout exercise might help your students imagine if they were right there and they had to make some of the critical decisions, how they might deal with some of that conflict, make some of those decisions, and get their team to consensus.
Well, that's great. This is kind of exciting and real-time situation that the decisions that are made in that forum, in our case, in our breakout, would have profound impact in millions of people, literally. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time. This was so insightful and so exciting. Thank you again.
You're welcome.